here.
Painful.
Let's see how long it takes. And 10, 11, 12. So there we go. So there's a delay, folks. We don't start on time ever. I apologize for that, but here we are, ready to kick things off with Christy Canterbury joining us from, is it Tyler, Texas?
So there we go. So there's a delay, folks. We don't start on time ever.
Hold on one second.
Here we are, ready to kick things off with Christy Canterbury joining us from Tyler, Texas.
Tyler, Texas.
I don't know why I have feedback here where we didn't have feedback before. Let's try this. 1 second.
Problem.
Yes, because you have the audio from the Skype and the audio streaming from the Snooth window coming in.
Okay. Closing that right now.
Well, there's a mute thing too. You can mute it actually, if you wanted to do that.
It is muted. Okay.
Even better. There we
Should
go.
be.
So here we are. Everything's great now. Little audio glitch figured out. Welcoming Christy Canterbury, Master of Wine from Tyler, Texas. How you doing, Christy?
I'm great. I'm really from New York. I'm just here in Tyler, Texas today. Please don't shoot me.
I think it's the other way around. We hope you don't shoot us.
Indeed. We love our concealed handgun weapons down here.
Yes.
Or at least the folks around me.
Nothing wrong with that. You know, a couple bottles of wine and concealed handguns are a natural fit. Thanks for joining us. And can you give the audience a little bit of background about you?
Yeah, sure. I live by eating and drinking and by traveling. That's the short version, but basically I write, speak, and judge wines all over the world, spend half my time traveling doing that, and manage to work really hard and have a good time all at the same time.
Okay. I'm going to try to figure out if the audio is good for everybody. Advice Sister says that it sounds like you're announcing a game in a large stadium. So I'm going to change the audio for a second. And can you say something, Christy? Let's see if this sounds better.
Howdy, y'all.
So we'll see. We have to wait 12 seconds now to figure out if that works for everybody else. Still an odd delay on her voice. Slight echo, but we're going to make it work if you can't fix it. Or, come on, help me out, folks. This 12-second thing is killing us. So we're going to be talking about the wines of Vouvray today. Still echoey. Why is it still echoey? I don't understand what's going on. It's perfect for us. So we're talking about the wines of... Oh, wrong.
Yeah, I have no issues.
You have no issues.
No echo.
All right. And I've got no echo. And Mike Reff says you should keep your Texas accent. I think we improved it. So we're talking about Vouvray. So where should we start? Do you want to start with a little bit of a rundown? I got a couple of maps here. Vouvray, of course, is in France. It's on the northwestern coast. I want to think eastern because it's on the Atlantic. Northwestern coast of France. It's based on the Loire River, which runs from Nantes into Tours, basically. And the region we're focusing on is this sort of this center, the Touraine. And here's a very nice little map that features all of the appellations within the Loire Valley. But we're just focusing on Vouvray, which is roughly here in the center. And to give people an idea, that's sort of like the size and scale of Vouvray. What can you tell us about Vouvray, Christy?
I think that Vouvray is interesting because
Can you tilt your camera down a little bit?
Yes, indeed.
How about up a little bit now?
I think Vouvray is really interesting because it's such a historical appellation, and certainly Chenin Blanc is very historical with regard to France and the Loire Valley. There are theories that the name Chenin Blanc comes from the chateau of Chenonceau, which we pronounce with a Chenonceau sound today, but it might have been pronounced as Chenonceau when it was built. And this is the chateau that stretches across the Loire River that has all the arches across it. Oh. And if you've been to the Loire Valley, it's the one that has the really cool kitchen with the reenactment of women making lots of different dishes for lunch with copper kettles and that sort of thing. And so Chenin has been planted in the Loire Valley possibly since back in 845.
845.
Yeah.
Yes.
We definitely know that it was planted there as of 1496 because there are mentions in a diary from the I don't know if he was a count or a duke or what have you, but the owner of the Chateau of Chenonceau at that time, saying that he just planted some new vineyards,
which is amazing, and it's been a vital and successful part of France's vinous fabric since then. I know that the Dutch loved it. There's a lot of trade. The church loved it. The King of England loved some of these great wines from the Loire Valley, and I know that our audience out there loves them too and would love to dig into some of them. So before we go any further, why don't we break into our first wine tonight? And the first wine tonight is the Sylvain Gadron Vouvray Brut 2011. I give you a nice label shot there. And I give you also a bottle shot because everybody loves bottle shots. 2011, sparkling wine. I think a lot of people out there would be surprised. Probably a lot of people out there are surprised by the selection of wines tonight. We have 2 sparkling wines and 2 secs. Vouvray's about 5,400 acres, and about 52% of the production of wine in Vouvray is sparkling wine. And I know that we discussed it a little bit before that you don't mind sparkling Vouvray. Can you talk a little bit about what sparkling Vouvray means to the region, how the wines are made, and why people should be tasting them?
Yeah, absolutely. Sparkling Vouvray is obviously 100% Chenin Blanc. It's made in the méthode traditionnelle, or the traditional method. So that means that its second fermentation happens in the bottle, just like in champagne. Obviously, most of the wines in the Loire and Vouvray are fermented in a tank as opposed to in barrel, like is a bit trendy in champagne today. So they're fermented in tank and then transferred into bottle. The second fermentation happens there. There's a minimum of 12 months of lees aging that's required before the wines are disgorged and then filled up with a little bit of topping wine and then put into the market. But a lot of the really high quality producers leave the wines on lees even longer than that. And I think we have a really interesting comparison between our first 2 bubblies tonight, because we have one that had 12 months on the lees and one that had 15 months. And obviously there are a lot of different factors that go into how wines taste, but I think one of them is the lees aging, which we'll see, which tends to give a little bit more creaminess on the palate.
That's always a good thing to point out. You know, we are very comfortable with terms like lees aging. A lot of people don't even know what lees are. So it's always good to backtrack. Can you explain what lees are to everybody?
Yeah, sure. Lees are the very romantic notion of dead yeast that worked very, very hard and ate up all the sugar that they could, produced all the alcohol they could, and then just kicked the bucket and fell into the bottom of the bottle. And the funny thing is that while they create flavor, while fermenting sugar into alcohol, they also create flavor after they bit the dust. And while they're literally looking like dust and specks of dust in the bottom of the bottle, they continue to give off flavor, and it's called, super geek term, autolysis.
That is a super geek term.
Yep.
And it is amazing that they do. They give off flavor. They create a texture in the wine. It's all this crazy chemistry that probably a lot of people are not that interested in knowing about, but it is really important because it does fundamentally change the wine, and that's what makes Method Traditionnel. That's what makes these wines so special, so different. So somebody said sex vouvray before, so sexy in a way, because it's an umami kind of flavor. It's this more rich, almost creamy texture. It's a very sensuous thing that happens with those dead yeast cells.
Yeah, your point that it's very umami is interesting, because a lot of wines, these sparkling wines are very fruit driven. They're youthful wines until they encounter that autolysis, or that lees aging, the dead yeast lees aging, and so you have a nice contrast of something that's savory, earthy, with something that's very youthful and fruity.
It's complexity. It's what sparkling wine can deliver that no other wine can really deliver because of that. Can you talk us through what you get out of this first sparkling wine?
Oh, yes. Let me grab my glass.
The good part, the tasting part.
The best part.
Yes.
Indeed. Pardon me. Wow. What I mostly get is minerality. And then I get behind that Chenin Blanc. But there is a very kind of chalky oyster shell immediacy, both on the nose and the palate, that's quite striking. Then once the wine hits my palate, I tend to taste that chalk and oyster shell kind of crumbled up and mixed together, along with some yellow fruits and say like a yellow plum or maybe some white cherries, and that remind me of Chenin Blanc. And then on the finish, which is it's somewhat short. It's not it's a perfectly delicious wine. It delivers everything that I expect, but it's not a particularly long wine in terms of finish. I wouldn't age this wine. I'd drink it up this summer and enjoy it. But I get a little bit of kind of an wet dog coat, a bit of wet wool character that is very typical of Chenin. And sometimes some of those descriptors that we use in wine sound really weird and unpleasant.
They do.
But they're a good thing when you're smelling wine, and they tend to actually speak very much of varietal character as well as terroir.
Which is interesting because lanolin, wooliness, cheesiness, sometimes with sparkling Chenin, I think are very appropriate terms, and people shouldn't be afraid of a little wet dog and just a little soupçon of wet dog in your sparkling Chenin. I don't. If it's dominant, I wouldn't be too excited.
I don't know. Maybe would wet puppy be more fun?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe wet puppy is better than wet dog. I don't know. Maybe
wet kitten. Let's call it wet kitten, and it'll be an internet sensation.
But kittens are so clean, that it's a. I don't know. It's a different. I don't know. Pheromone something.
It could be. It certainly is. They don't smell like wet puppies, but they're definitely much cuter. So the wine taste of oyster shells. The wine is very mineral. I've got two actually. I found two little schematics. The science of minerality. Minerality in wine is this great nebulous sort of thing because scientists will tell you there's no transfer of minerality. There's no direct uptake of minerality through the roots. But if you taste wine enough, it is striking how, with some certainty, you get a sense that some wines are grown on limestone in particular, or slate, shale. Something that definitely happens that informs the flavor and the taste of the wine. And Vouvray is a limestone-based region. There's a lot of clay on top. I've got these little diagrams I'm going to go here.
Yeah, let's check those out.
This is one in French. It shows you a cave. There are a lot of caves, natural caves that are used for aging in Vouvray. Here's a little trivia tip. They say that when there's fog in the cave, it means a storm is coming. I think that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool thing.
I'd never heard that one. I like that.
Yeah, that's.
Wait, there's actually fog inside the cave.
Inside the caves. If you go in somebody's cave and it's foggy, they say, well, that's because a storm is coming. You learn something new. I was not convinced, and then it rained, so it might be true. So there's this 90 meters of limestone, calcium-based limestone. Then there's a clay and silica-based layer, and then there are slate, flint rocks, basically. There's a version of it in English where you have. Oh, this is also in French. I thought this was in English. I took the wrong thing. But also very similar. That's the terroir. That's the soil of the Loire Valley, right?
Yeah, and it definitely differs because different bits, as you can imagine, hills and valleys and plateaus, that sort of thing, produce different stuff. And there are a couple of fancy terms for different bits of Vouvray soil. So obviously tuffeau means chalky limestone, and there are lots of cellars carved out of tuffeau, even chateaux carved out of tuffeau, around the Loire Valley. And then you get bits of land that have some gravel and some flint, and those are called perruques. And those give spicier and more delicate wines. And then you've got as you were talking about at the beginning, Greg, the clay and gravel overlaid limestone, and that's called ogui. And those are supposed to produce wines that are very silky. And in fact, Rabelais called them the super crazy and very famous French writer in 1533 called them wines of taffeta. And ladies out there, taffeta, silk, very different, but hey, it's wine. Some things are relative.
And wine writing has not changed that much over
the
centuries.
Exactly. Good point, Greg.
We're still talking about the same things. So that's fascinating. So here's so Chenin Blanc is I love Chenin Blanc. It's a very interesting grape in many places where it's planted. It's never better than in the Loire Valley, but it is a great. I was going to say it's really transparent to terroir, but it's not really. I think other grapes are transparent. It does something. It expresses. It doesn't just reveal terroir. It expresses terroir, and I think you just sort of hit on that fact that it really doesn't tell you what the soil is. It produces a different style of wine depending on where it's grown, which is kind of exciting. And not only is there the different styles dependent on the terroir, but you have everything from sec to sparkling to demi-sec to moelleux. You could almost only drink Chenin and be happy.
Yeah, it really almost gives you all the possible wine styles except for red. And it's quite interesting as well because you're talking about it reveals the place. Yeah, it does because it's almost never blended with anything. It's almost expressly Chenin Blanc, which also says that, frankly, it doesn't need to be blended with anything, which I think is a great testament to its nobility.
And it doesn't need wood. It can use some old wood, can use some softening sometimes, but it's not like Chardonnay, which can be built on new wood.
Yeah, definitely not. And certainly it could have some new wood. You get some Savennières producers that make Chenin Blanc with some new wood and different styles, but Chenin can just be itself. It's pretty comfortable in its own skin, I would say. And as you say, it makes everything. It's bubbly, it's dry, it's off dry, it's sweet. It's got the full Monty.
It has the full Monty. So before we move on to the next wine, I just want to put this slide up. It's the hashtag #URLoire, Twitter at Loire Valley Wine, Facebook Loire Valley Wine Bureau, and you can visit www.loirevalley.wine.com, and you see all the backslashes. I'm not going to go through the backslashes. Go to Top Nav and hit Vouvray, and it'll take you to where you want to be. And Christy, if people want to follow you, what are your handles? respective handles on social media where you want people to follow you.
I'm at Canterbury Wine. Canterbury is in the tails in the cathedral, and then wine.
Without the H.
Yeah.
Yes. So on that note, I think we should move on to the next wine, the Champalou Sparkling Vouvray. I will do my
that is excellent.
Obligatory bottle shot. So this is an NV, non-vintage, and I have a label shot here. It's not shaky, and it's imported by Kermit Lynch, and there are some importers in the world who have a reputation for greatness. Oh, incidentally, that last wine, the Gaudron, is $16 at retail, and now we're moving to a wine that's about $24 at retail. But Champalou is one of the great names of Vouvray, certainly one of the great names of sparkling Vouvray. But I was saying there's some importers that are worth watching out for. Somebody wants to know if you're on Delectable to follow. Can they follow you on Delectable? Yep. I don't know.
I'm on Delectable.
Brian, she's on Delectable.
I'm just me. I think I go through Twitter as well on Delectable, but I guess I'm just at Canterbury on Delectable too.
Who knew?
So
it's very confusing.
You can find me.
All this social stuff's very confusing. Anyway, so Kermit Lynch is one of the great importers. So if I see Kermit Lynch on the label, at $24 for a sparkling wine, I would say that's something worth trying. And then knowing Champalou, this is a fabulous wine. Everybody should be trying this wine, I think.
Yeah, there's no question. As I was telling you before, Greg, Champalou and Furreau are my two favorite Vouvray bubblies, Chenin bubblies, hands down. They're amazing wines. They're amazing wines every single time I open the bottle. Just off the charts good.
Off the charts good. One thing I like about this, one thing I noticed right away, I don't know what the dosage is for these two wines, but the first wine certainly comes off as a slightly sweeter, more unctuous wine. This is, for me, much cleaner, brighter on the palate, drier, more focus and precision. But I think that also, I was going to say that has to do probably with the vintage. 11 was a very difficult vintage, so the previous wine was 11. This is a non-vintage. Who knows what's in here, but nonetheless, it's 50% more expensive, and I think that shows in the wine.
I agree, and actually, I have some numbers here, and I don't, I'm not certain that they are the numbers that I have in terms of residual sugar are for the same vintages.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I was kind of combing information from producers' websites and importers' websites and that sort of thing, but I had 16 grams for the Gaudron.
That's all.
And I had 9 for the Champalou. But again, I don't know if those are correct for the vintages. So
sure. I don't know if they're correct, but I would say that the ratio sounds correct. You know, roughly double. I wouldn't have guessed. How many for the first one for the Gaudron?
16.
I wouldn't have guessed
16.2.
It's a lot. I would guess a little less than that, but.
Yeah, possibly. Of course, 11 was a really challenging year.
Challenging is a good word.
Could have a lot of high acid, trying to be balanced by a wee bit more sugar.
Which is true.
Just maybe.
Well, whether or not it's in the wine, it's a very good point to discuss. It's easy to throw out grams of residual sugar, but without knowing the pH of the wine and the grams of acid per liter, you don't know how sweet that wine is going to taste.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Total acidity and even pH make a massive difference, and sugar can do a lot of things to balance and to mask different things in wine, but you have to know what the acid is to really understand the wine.
Absolutely. So one of the interesting things about Champalou is that the Loire Valley first of all is cool. It's like shockingly cool. Vouvray, it's very consistent climate through the summer, averages about highs of 75 degrees, lows right a little bit above 50. I mean, to put that in perspective, in Napa, you're in the mid-80s. In Tuscany, you're in the high 80s. Even in British Columbia, the Okanagan, the Niagara Peninsula, you're at 80 for 2 months for July and August.
I was just there. I can attest to that.
I bet you can. It's cool and it's damp because it's based on the Loire River and it's based on all the tributaries that come off. So it's not the easiest place to grow anything, and yet it's sort of a hotbed of organic, biodynamic activity. Champollion is neither organic or biodynamic, but it's lutte raisonnée, which is the reasoned battle, is a little translation from French. They do only what is necessary when is necessary, and otherwise they are generally organic. And I find it fascinating that these people in this challenging climate have made such an effort to create wines that are as natural as possible. Do you have any view on organic wines? I know that we have a biodynamic wine, one that's farmed biodynamically. I don't think it's certified, coming up later.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we almost have to have a perspective on these things when it, especially in the Loire Valley, where this is such a big topic and where there are so many wine producers making their name on biodynamic and the quote natural end quote styles of wines. Basically, what I want is a good wine. That's my opinion, and I love for it to be farmed organically and biodynamically. But if it is farmed organically and biodynamically and it stinks in the bottle, then, well, I don't want to drink it. So while I laud the efforts to make wines that are respectful of the earth and of our human bodies, which is a good thing, I still want to. And I think it's interesting. We do have actually our last wine, the Vigno Chevreau, is actually certified. I think it was EcoCert. So that's organic,
Yes.
not biodynamic. But
on the front label it says "Vin biologique."
Yeah. Yes. So biologique means en français. That's organic,
Yes.
and it is. It's they were actually pretty early on the curve. They were certified in 1999. So EcoCert is organic, not biodynamic. So on a French wine, biologique is organic, and then biodynamique would be biodynamic.
But I believe since 1995 they've been farming biodynamically.
Yeah, it could be.
Whether they're making the
and
wine,
it sounds like that's kind of their philosophy. So
it does indeed, and I think it's fascinating. I'm just, when my head disappears, it means that one of my monitors went off, and I'm just clicking things everywhere.
I thought I had enough to do.
Yes.
Good for you.
So for a little while, I put up an appellation map. Somebody asked about the appellation map. Somebody else asked, is Chenin the only variety allowed in Vouvray? That's a question for you.
Only white variety. Yeah. And only white variety that can say Vouvray on the label.
Okay. And there was another question I wrote down on some page, and I've just too many pages here today. Oh, the price. Well, we figured out the price. Other varietals, the price, elevation, it's pretty flat. I don't think there's any significant elevation. Is there?
No, not at all. Not very high at all. The Loire is very flat. It's amazing. It's an amazing place to go bike riding, and you can take a lot of people with you because it's quite easy to to go for kilometers and kilometers because it's not too tough.
It's full of Disneyland castles.
Oh, it is. It is amazing. And I mentioned Chenonceau, which might have been called Chenonceau, but that is phenomenal. And of course, oh my goodness, what is the great liqueur that is named after Loire Chateau? It's not. I'm thinking Chambertin. That is incorrect. But that also was good. It'll come to me.
Yeah, stop thinking about it. It'll come.
Yeah.
So this is.
I don't know if this is a good place to insert this, but we're talking about Chenin Blanc, and I just want to point out that really the only place in the world it's grown is in the Loire. And for me personally, I think that Vouvray is the pinnacle. And there's great other Chenin Blanc in the Loire Valley, so I don't mean to make anyone cross. But to me, Vouvray is really the ultimate classic appellation. And it's fascinating to me that the only other place in the world where Chenin Blanc is grown is really South Africa, in quantity, that is.
Yes.
And in fact, South Africa grows a lot more Chenin Blanc than France, where it comes from.
Didn't know that. And it used to be called Steen.
Yeah, and you know what? Even better, South Africa did not know until I think it was about the 1960s or 70s that Steen was actually Chenin Blanc. They thought it was. I have in my notes somewhere here. They thought it was another grape variety, but they didn't realize that it was Chenin Blanc.
They didn't realize how lucky they were. Todd wants to know: is it Chambord?
No, it was not.
No.
Let me find my notes. I'm forgetting.
That's all right.
I should not have forgotten.
So Phil wants to know.
I don't. Here we go.
Yep.
I didn't forget.
Okay.
I didn't know.
Different.
It was the 1960s when South Africa discovered that Steen was Chenin Blanc, and I don't know what they thought it was before. But just for a reference point, today France has about 9,800 hectare of Chenin Blanc, and South Africa has 18,800 hectare.
Wow, double.
So if you want to go acres, that's about 24,000 acres versus, say, 46,000 acres.
And
so big difference.
Put things in perspective, most of these people that we're tasting today have about 20 to 30 hectares, so 50 to 70 acres. That's the average size, I think, of the people we're working with today. So if you think about how big South Africa is, it's truly massive in comparison.
Yes, absolutely.
Sparkling Vouvray, we have a couple of questions. Early drinking, or should you cellar it?
I don't know what you think, Greg, but my vote is drink it up.
I think
I think if you can hold on for a year or two, but I kind of think that they're so lovely and youthful and joyful and effervescent, and why wouldn't you just capture them at their moment of youthful perfection? How about you, Greg?
I think the same thing. What popped into my mind was the really good ones, 3 years.
Okay.
Put it in the cellar for 3 years, and that's where it's at its peak. I wouldn't say at its peak, but that's certainly, for me, at part of its plateau, and there's no need to age them longer than that. Although I think most of them are ready to go. There's no need to cellar them.
Yeah,
that would be my thing.
Most of them should be, aperitivo, summer patio wines. What you greet your dear friends at the door with, glass in hand.
Yes. And what about food?
Ooh. Food. It really depends. I think that if we're talking about bubblies, we're talking about lighter foods. And I like things that have anise and fennel and basil, so kind of greenish top notes, at least for accents, or maybe dill. I think that works really well. What do you think, Greg?
I think a very light, flaky white fish that's been grilled very gently, so it picks up just a hint of smoke. I think for me that is a beautiful combination in the summertime. Grilled in the backyard, flounder, fluke. We're in New York on Long Island. We both know Brad Kane, who's eating fluke every day right now. And I saw his picture on Facebook of his poorly grilled fluke, and I thought that would be a perfect match for this.
That does sound good. And yes, Brad is the king of fishing this time of year.
He is indeed.
And you mentioned kind of a bit of smokiness. And I was thinking earlier, as I was tasting these wines before we went online, I thought about a bit of a smoked trout salad. So over some kind of nice, fresh, herbally greens with some dill and other fresh garden herbs. So
one of the things that you brought up before was this balance of sugar and acid. And, I was sort of focusing on the fact that the wines have a certain amount of sugar, but the sugar is there to balance out the acid. And these are pretty high acid wines, which is something that can sort of slip by because they're so elegant and fresh on the palate. And I think that's why they would work well. And any place you're putting lemon, which is I'm going to the fish, I think it would work really well. And I would be interested in trying this with some avocado to see how that works. A very challenging thing to pair, but...
Actually, that's interesting that you mentioned it, because when I tasted our first still wine, the Domaine du Margolo, I thought of a salad that a good friend, a good pal of mine, Jean Riley, who's also a master wine, made for me at the beginning of the summer, that I've made about a half a dozen times this summer.
Oh, pray
that
tell.
I really love, and it is fennel, grapefruit, and avocado, because you get the fennel and the grapefruit for kind of these really high acid herbally notes, and you get the avocado to kind of balance it out in the end and give it some creaminess.
I had a tomato and avocado sandwich today, and that's what made me think of this. So
I'm on your team.
We might be onto something. And it's tomato season, so this sounds very exciting. Luis Alberto said it worked great with chicken and lime sauce. Out there is pairing it with a cucumber salad as those green top notes. Advice Sisters all over lobster, crab, and oysters. I think I could see these wines are so mineral. I like the oyster idea. I just like any excuse for eating oysters, so this would work perfectly for me with oysters.
Yeah, well, I have a pairing for our last one when we get to the Vino Chevreau, which is actually what I'm going to make tonight.
Okay, well, you're behind us, so you have that benefit. So let's move on to the Domaine du Margolo, our first still sec. So this is a sec. It's a dry one. It's a sec on the back. But sec, again, we were talking about Chenin, high acid. Sec can have I guess it's up to 9 grams per liter. It doesn't mean it's bone dry. It just means it feels dry. It tastes dry. And I'll give you a fancy... Well, I have a label shot, but it's not the right label shot. But I'll show it to you anyway because I spent so much time searching for all of these things. But that's not the right label shot. I'll go back here. I'll do my bottle shot again. So this is label shot. And just out of morbid curiosity, this is 12.5% alcohol. I know that some people out there are interested in those things, and it is $15, but we probably should have gone to the price after we sort of tasted it. So,
yeah, that's another good point to bring up is just the price. These wines are all incredibly affordable. You can almost, with the exception of possibly the exception of the Champollion, you can pull out a 20, a single bill, and you're done. You've got a great bottle. The wines are incredibly inexpensive, and to your other point, they're quite low in alcohol. 12.5% is getting on up there for Vouvray most of the time. Not in every vintage, but especially when you're talking about anything that's bubbly, fizzy, anything that's dry, or even a demi-sec, you're probably looking at under 12.5% alcohol, and that's kind of a nice benefit, especially when they're so easy to kick back. It's a good safeguard.
They are, and to that point, so we both tasted these before. At least for me, the Margolo, with an hour of air, has ratcheted up its game. This is drinking much better to my palate than it was an hour ago, which just goes back to what you said. This is really Chenin Blanc from Vouvray in particular, from the Loire Valley, world class. These are world class wines, and these are probably, as a group, the cheapest group of world class wines that you can buy on the planet. I mean, you can buy the top examples of Vouvray for two $20 bills.
Yeah, I think, except for some of the geeks, certainly on the East Coast and some of the Loire Valley devotees, this is one of the most overlooked wine classes in the world, not only for value, but for flavor and for history. And I think they have been unfairly subjected to this search for bigger, richer, badder, better, which is not necessarily the case. And there's nothing wrong with looking for bigger wines in any way, shape, or form, whether they're white, red, or otherwise. But these are finessed wines. These are terroir-driven wines. These are delicate wines. And that has not been the trend lately. And they've suffered from not being in vogue in that regard. And they are definitely popping back up into the chic circles. But there are only a few of those chic circles still are starting to emerge. So they need a little bit more time to come back into the mainstream, I think.
Yeah, but we know what happens then, and the prices go up. So we should probably just
That's right.
end this discussion. Yes, end this discussion right now. Out there said something very interesting that he commented that even this is even working at room temperature. Talking about the Margalo, I'm drinking it at room temperature. I don't have a fridge or an ice bucket here. I can't believe how good this is at room temperature.
I've chilled mine, and I have tasted it twice now. I tasted it chilled at, I guess that was an hour and a half ago, actually. And I poured it again, and it's been sitting there for about half an hour, and it's definitely opening up. And to the point of temperature, and as I said, delicate wines don't need to be chilled to the bone.
No.
It can be, to pull a feminine comparison, and it's like, very skinny women, they get very cold, and they're all huddled in, and
Yes.
they need shawls to wrap around themselves, and they're not showing how beautiful they are, and their great shoulders and what have you. But with a little bit of time, a little bit of warmth, the personality can really come out.
Absolutely, and this really shows. I think it's a beautiful combination of the terroir Vouvray and the quality, the character of Chenin Blanc, the bright, beautiful, yet nuanced quality of fine Chenin Blanc. And this is 2012, which is, again, challenging vintage. Not an easy vintage, not a particularly bad vintage for dry Vouvray. I mean, you're making it from the least ripened grapes, but certainly not an easy vintage in which to make wine in the Loire Valley.
Yeah. And so many vintages are not easy. It's interesting to me that in the 20th century, there is one single vintage that is really pointed to as the vintage of the century, and that was 1947. Hello, right after World War II, the vineyards having not had a lot of men around, and the women doing so many things they couldn't be well tended to, that one single vintage could be heralded so broadly, so widely, is amazing, especially considering the stage that the vineyards must have been in. And then, of course, 1959 was also considered fantastic as well. And not that there weren't other good ones, but 1947 is the vintage of the 20th century. And even now, in the 21st, we have 03, 05, 09. So we're already trying to rack them up, and that's certainly partially due to climate change. But I think it goes to say that it's a tough place to grow grape varieties, especially when times are cooler.
It is, and until very, very recently, maybe 15 years ago, these wines, they weren't free, obviously, but they were as close to free as you could get. And you were able to pick up wines from 1947. And of course, the Moyos were more expensive than the Secs, but every sweetness level, every grade of old Vouvray that I have tasted has aged spectacularly well, which is another plus in its corner. I don't think there's a more age-worthy white wine on the face of the earth.
Yeah, there's all that inherent acidity. And I would just say, certainly, yeah, Vouvray and Chenin from the Loire have amazing capabilities of aging. And there's just so much acid. And it doesn't matter if it's dry or sweet. But certainly I think that the sweet wines will long outlive the dry wines. And they are mind-blowingly good. And they don't just hang on, they improve. And there's a difference in the two.
Yeah, and even the 1947s are not old. They are mature in the way I am mature, not old. And they are more complex, but that acidity keeps them fresh. Yes, I tell myself that on a daily basis. So a couple of questions are coming in. People want to know, when we're talking about challenging vintages, were there hailstorms in Vouvray? I'm going back up. I don't know if they're talking about this year. There was hail. There was devastating hail in the past. I think they had hail as well this year's, but I don't know how bad it was this year. Can you talk a little bit about the hail over the past 3 years?
I can speak to last year. They definitely had some serious hail, and in 2013 it was a nasty year. I'm less attuned to 2012, and I know they had some in 11, but I can't speak 11. So well to 12. Sorry for that.
That might be me. And then there's a whole cheese discussion going on the board. And
my favorite, white wine and cheese.
And for me, Vouvray and cheese, because you have all the different styles, the different levels of sweetness, but different producers have different styles. So you could do a night of cheese and Vouvray, and you could pull out 12 bottles of Vouvray and 12 different cheeses, and it would be an exceptional night. I would feel terrible the next morning, but the night would be fantastic.
Yes, both for the overload of wonderful cheese as well as the magnitude of wine consumed.
Yes.
But it would all seem very reasonable, I'm sure, in the time it was happening. I think that the only cheese that Vouvray might not go with is, kind of the long-aged cheddars and that sort of thing. But it is so versatile, and I think, especially in the U.S., we're accustomed to thinking that red wine is supposed to go with cheese, and I think that cheese almost always goes with white wine better than red.
I agree.
And I think that Vouvray is the perfect wine to go with cheeses, not just for its multitude of flavors. It can cover a range of flavors that cheeses do, especially kind of those kind of moldy, ashy blue cheeses. But also because you get everything from dry to sweet.
So what? One cheese. Pick one cheese. One cheese for the Margalot.
One cheese. Oh, it would have to be something goat-driven, possibly sheep, but I feel like something goat-driven.
Something goat-driven, I think, is a little
How
bit of age.
Do you have a choice?
I was thinking it might be sheep's milk, but ultimately I'm thinking of goats that is a little bit aged. It's gotten a little soft. It's still crumbly in the middle. Nice thin slice on some sort of cracker. I think that would be fantastic. I wouldn't go any farther than that.
I might add a sweet apple slice, depending on how, if you had a richer style of Vouvray.
That's all for
maybe
you.
A little bit of sweet apple in there.
Actually,
just kind of
maybe pear. I might go for pear instead of apple.
Okay, yeah, to counterbalance a little bit of that acid of the goat cheese, then a little bit of the dryness, maybe, depending on how aged it is.
And it's a little bit more subtle than the sharp cut of apple. So maybe. All right, there are people discussing a cheese and wine pairing party, so we're going to write all these down and we're going to do it. We're going to do it sometime. Wine Wonket out there is having the Champollion with homemade pesto sauce, and she says it's pairing beautifully. And Peter is telling us that sheep are just fluffy goats, and Lingprof is having a creamy goat cheese with rosemary crackers with her wine, and so there's a lot of success out there, I think.
And I just saw someone talking about the Délices de Bourgogne with sparkling. Amy wine for me. Yeah, yes. I can totally see that because Délices de Bourgogne is so unctuous. It sounds like a great pairing.
It certainly is.
And I missed who it was, but whenever you want me to come over for the pesto, I'm ready.
We're making it right now. You have to get to California tonight.
I'll get to jet plane back to New York.
There you go. We'll make some pesto. So we have Fontina, fig and cheese. Somebody asked about chocolate. Chocolate would be challenging with these dry wines, I think, for me at least.
I think that even with the sweet wines, chocolate would be really tough. Maybe not even a milk chocolate. Yeah, chocolate's
tough.
It's got some edge to it. I don't know. What do you think, Greg? Could a milk chocolate work with this?
No,
What about a white chocolate?
I was thinking white chocolate, but that's not chocolate.
It's not.
That's some crazy form of waxy butter. That's not chocolate.
Yeah. True.
So we should move on to the last wine.
All right.
Winormus is saying the Margalot works so well with the Poisse. I would like to try that. I would like to see about that pairing. So we have this last wine. And I'll put up a label, Vigno Chevreau, Cuvée Silex. Silex refers to siliceous soil, silica soil. The bottle I have is a little different, but here on the bottom it says Vin issu de raisons d'agriculture biologique, which means wine made with grapes from organic farming. And I'm going to hold up my bottle here, and it just says Vin biologique at the very bottom. So this is a slightly different label, and this is probably what you'll see in the U.S. It's brought in by Cynthia Hurley. And this also is 12.5%. And we're serving this last because I think both of us thought this was a little bit more complex when we first tried it than the previous one. And I'm just curious now that it's an hour later and things have changed. Good wine is alive. and air is it's like it's the same for us. It breathes. It's fuel, and things change and become more perfumed and less perfumed, and that's one of the exciting things about wine. So I'm curious what has happened here. Let's check this out. What are your thoughts on this wine?
I love this wine. To me, this is kind of the creme de la creme of Vouvray, because the Cuvée Select, this is the limestone, the tuffeau of Vouvray, and there is just a wee strip on top of clay and silicates, and that is the Aubouis. It's Aubouis that I mentioned before, and that gives a very filigreed texture to the wine. I'm very much a texture taster, but there is also so much flavor here, and as opposed to being a powerhouse of flavor, it has this filigree texture behind it. So there's this really interesting juxtaposition to me of these two things happening in the mouth. And to me, this is just, it's mind-blowingly complex and totally satisfying.
And it's $21 freaking dollars. And I agree. This is like, it's like layers and layers of silk in the mouth that somehow, when they bind together, have this power. It has such depth and cut, and perfect balance, and explodes with all these flavors. And what kills me, the texture of this wine is limestone. It's almost like I put limestone in my mouth.
Yeah.
Which is that, we had that discussion in the beginning about scientists saying that there's no transfer of minerality. Well, why does this taste like there's limestone in my mouth?
Yeah. It's stunning. And this, to me, is a wine that must have food. And food at the table. This is a wine that requires a bit more reflection. It's not a cocktail wine. Of course it could be, but I think it deserves more. And so I mentioned that I had a pairing for this, and I have two of them. And one would be quite simply uni sushi, if you want to go pure, because I see that minerality of the limestone, and that kind of combines with salinity from the sea. But there's also this generosity of fruitness, not overly generous, but enough generosity of fruitness to go with the sweetness of the uni. And otherwise, I think that a great pairing would be roast pork loin with roasted parsnips and carrots, which is, I think, what I'm going to have to make
tonight,
possibly tomorrow night for dinner.
Okay. Somebody mentioned that this was salty. You mentioned salty as a compliment here. I think that this wine is salty, a little bit salty on the palate. I just love this texture. Seafood. It would work with seafood, but I don't know. Something about this is leaning me towards hazelnuts and mushrooms. I don't know what I would do with hazelnuts and mushrooms, but
what are you going to do with those two things? Come on.
Pork
Give
loin.
us a hint.
It would be fish. It would be Dover sole, probably in a Meunier butter, something like that. But I don't want fish with it because I think that it's a sneaky wine, and I think it's a much bigger wine than it's so elegant and balanced that you think, oh, it's a light wine. And I think there's a lot of power here. I think your pork thing, I would like to try this. I don't know. It's an unformed recipe, but I think this could do well with a very subtle pork belly and lentil dish, which is coming out of nowhere.
I'm down with lentils, yeah.
A little pork belly preparation on top of lentils. I would like to try that. And the lentils could have some toasted hazelnuts in there. I'd get there eventually. I don't know. You said it's not a cocktail wine, but for me, this is a great wine to sit and enjoy as we fantasize about what we would serve it with.
And then possibly spend a few hours creating different things and continue to pop the corks on a couple of extra bottles.
Yeah, yes.
It's amazing. And I think like the wine prior to it, it really is opening up and expressing itself even that much more enticingly with a higher temperature. I'm thinking it's being less cold, but that means higher temperature. Yes. It is really just jumping out of the bottle. So
yeah,
I think
totally
both the Margalot and the Vigneault Chevreau are good examples of don't make your wines bone chilled. bone-chillingly cold.
Don't do it. That's for bad wines.
Yeah.
Did I say that? I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, so just a couple of questions. Louise, it's $21 a bottle. That's the price I got. $21.
Yeah.
And this
even 2021. It depends on where you buy it.
Sure. Buy it by the case. If you don't drink it this year, it'll be great next year. If you don't get to it next year, it'll be great the year after. This is a wine that if you have a cellar, I wouldn't worry about buying a case and drinking 2 bottles a year. A couple of other single source for these, I don't know. Cook for you, that could be arranged. Let's see. So Dizelle asked, Americans are so hung up on varietal wines. They like Cabernet, they like Chardonnay, they like Sauvignon Blanc. Do you think the fact that this is Vouvray and it's not a varietal wine is one of the things that's holding Vouvray sales back?
I don't know about you, but I don't. I think that it just the taste of the wine is not what U.S. consumers mostly expect. It's mineral, it's somewhat lean, it's lower in alcohol. It's not so fruit driven. It's not, a big basket of tropical fruit. And I think it's just not what they expect.